So I asked you to look at these cave paintings that we found all around the world, okay, that go back 30,000, 40,000 years. And as you can see from those pictures, they're beautiful, right? And they're extremely creative, artistic. And so I want to look at 3 questions about the cave paintings today. First of all, how were they painted? They didn't have the technology we have today, so how did they paint these cave paintings? Second question is, why did they do this? Because when you're in a cave, it's very dark, it's very cold, and it's very hard to breathe. But they spent days in there painting them. So why did they do that? Okay, that's the second question. And the third question is, and the hardest question is, what do these cave paintings represent, or what do they mean? So the first caveat, the first thing I want you to be aware of is that there's absolutely no agreement on any of these questions. Cave paintings is something that we have a lot of around the world, but there's very little evidence as to what they are, what they represent, and how they were painted. So there are a lot of guesses, okay? And the case that I will present to you today is my own personal interpretation based on my research and my understanding of the evidence. But please be aware that there are many different interpretations, and the evidence is extremely unclear about many of these things, okay? So let's start. Let's look at some cave paintings. Because this is in the Chauvel Cave, and this started about 30,000 years ago. So these cave paintings were a continuous process where different people at different times went to the caves and painted different pictures. They might have added more things to the pictures as well, okay? But as you can see, this is clearly representing animals, right? Bisons, rhinoceros. The other thing that's interesting about these paintings is that there's really no focus, okay? You see lions, you see horses, you see rhinos, okay? It's almost like nature is one interconnected picture, okay? So now the question then is, okay, how did they paint these pictures? So first of all, they mainly use red and black, okay? Red came from ochre, which is a type of clay, and black comes from charcoal. Okay, so that's the coloring they used. Inside a cave, it's very dark, so they had to use lighting. Okay, so what they did was they got some animal fat and put fire on it. Okay, so they could see some of the caves, but not all of them. So now the question is, why did they paint these pictures? And a lot of the clue is this. A lot of the clue is where we found these paintings. And we found these paintings in a very special place in the cave. We found these paintings in the cave, the section of the cave where the acoustics was the best, the sound was the best. So what this means is we're fairly convinced that these paintings were part of a ritual which included music, because we found musical instruments as well, flutes, okay? So in other words, we think that these paintings are like Göbekli Tepe, which is like maybe now and then these hunter-gatherers would come into this cave for a religious festival where there's music, dancing, okay? And they are watching these paintings together. So these paintings are part of a religious festival. In other words, these paintings are not about art, it's really about religion. It's expressing the religious beliefs of the people at that time. Okay? So does this make sense, guys? All right. So let's imagine that we go back in time to this time. It's very cold, And our memories have been wiped out, meaning like we've lost the knowledge of today. We've lost science. We've lost what we learned in biology class, okay? So my first question is, we're in this world, and what are things that amaze us or make us wonder or make us in awe? What are things that capture our imagination, okay? Meaning like we see these things and we're like, oh my God, God must exist because there's no way I can explain what happened. What are these things that we would see and we would be surprised by, marvel at, basically be in awe of? What are things about our life that amazes us? What's the first thing that we can think of? How about childbirth? Childbirth, right? Does that make sense to you guys? Because I'm a father, I have 3 kids. And I can tell you, when I first saw my child being born, I was amazed. Because you have this life come out of nothing, right? Okay, and if you never study biology, you can't explain what happened. So that's the first thing that amazes us about being human, childbirth, right? What's the second thing that would amaze you if you were back here? Yeah? Child growing up, okay, so child growing up. Yes. What else? How about, yeah? Okay, how about the stars, right? It's late at night, and remember, there's no pollution. So you see out into the darkness, and it's all stars glowing, right? That's pretty amazing. So what do you think these stars are? You're staring out into outer space, right? And you see these stars glowing brightly in the sky. What are they? What's your own explanation, really? Excuse me? Okay, possibly, okay? Possibly souls or other worlds, okay? Planets, worlds. In other words, the first thing that you recognize is that our world is just one of many worlds out there. Does that make sense? All right? Other things that will surprise you is nature, right? The animals, the trees, the vastness of nature. Okay? Now, these are things that surprise us, and they force us to ask the question, why? So now let's try to construct a theory of how to connect all these things, okay? All right. So we know that the stars, there's other powers out there, right? There has to be gods or the soul of really great people or other planets or other worlds, okay? How does childbirth happen then? What is the womb? It comes from the womb, right? What is a womb then? A portal, a door, right? So, what the womb is a portal that the soul comes from another world into our world. Does that make sense? All right. So, there are these portals, okay? And what in nature most resembles a womb? What in nature most resembles a womb? A mother's womb. Like a cave, right? Do you understand? A cave. So we can think like, okay, we humans come from a mother's womb, which is a cave, right? A tunnel. But animals also come from a womb, which is the cave, okay? So the cave is a portal into another world. So why are we in a cave celebrating animals? What are we really doing? We kill them, right? So we kill them, and now what are we trying to do? let them forgive us, but what else are we really trying to do? Once we eat them, what must we do now? Yes, bring them back, right? Do you understand? So when we kill them, we think they go back into the spirit world, right? So now we have to summon them back from the spirit world into our world. Okay? Does that make sense? So, in other words, what this belief is really saying is that we are all interconnected. And for every action that we make, we have to do something else to compensate for action, okay? So if we kill an animal to eat the meat, then we need to ask forgiveness and then bring this animal back into the spirit world to maintain balance and harmony in nature. Does that make sense, guys? Okay? All right. Now, another amazing thing that we found about Ice Age cave paintings is that they have symbols, okay? So we saw pictures, but a Canadian anthropologist named Genevieve von Petzinger, she went all around the world and she documented symbols in these Ice Age cave paintings, and she found recurring symbols. For example, the hand, okay? The hand is everywhere. The spiral, the quadrangle, the circle, okay? The asterisk. Let me ask you this question. Why would paintings have symbols? Why would drawings have symbols? Why can't you just draw the thing? Why do you need to have symbols? Maybe you're trying to visualize an idea. Okay, you can't draw energy or life force or cycle repetition, so you just have to use a symbol to represent it, okay? Which means what? Which means that each picture is a mythology. It's a story, okay? Do you understand? The pictures aren't trying to show you a picture, they're trying to tell you a story about the world. And that's why symbols are important. Because in a story, there are ideas that you cannot visually express. Okay, does that make sense? Okay? That's the first thing. Second thing is that you're trying to visualize the language of the spirit world. Okay? So this goes back to making the concept mysterious. Okay, why do we think this? The answer is this. Okay, we think that when they drew, the way to access the spirit world is to use drugs, okay, what we'll call psychedelics. So, in other words, there are certain plants that if you drink, okay, it makes you see things. And the things they see are, in fact, the symbols, the geometric signs. So, in other words, they went to the spirit world, or they think they went into the spirit world, and then they're just trying to express the language of the spirit world, okay? Does that make sense? Now we have a more comprehensive or complete understanding of why they did art, okay? The first reason is what they're trying to do is they're trying to visualize their mythology, okay? They're trying to take this idea, their understanding of how the world works, their religion, and they're trying to visualize it, okay? So art is basically religion. There's no difference. Second thing is that they're trying to show to themselves how reality works, okay? They're trying to show that the underlying reality is a soul or God, okay? Does that make sense? Then the last thing, which is the most important, is they're trying to create a common memory and imagination. A language, a mythology that they all share together, okay? And this is what we call society. Does that make sense? So in other words, okay, the argument I'm trying to make to you today is, one, religion has always been there since the dawn of humanity. Okay, that's the first. Second thing is that religion allows us to communicate with each other, to be together in society. So the third thing is religion is what allows us to be fundamentally human. Without religion, we could not be human. We could not think. We could not communicate. We could not imagine.